This F40, chassis 76687, is a very, very early car indeed. In fact, so early when we purchased it that we thought it deserved some more research. And that research revealed that this is in fact one of the very, very early pre-series prototype cars built and developed by Michelotto. The Classic A shows that the car was delivered new in December 1990, which didn't ring true for us versus the early chassis number. And when we investigated the car and had a good look at it underneath, we found that actually this really was a prototype and had many, many interesting features, which I'm going to run you through now. Despite being one of the earliest chassis numbers on our system, the Classic A states that this car was delivered new in December 1990. And that doesn't make sense, but that's for good reason, because this is one of the very earliest pre-series prototypes built by Michelotto for Ferrari, and was retained as such by Ferrari for a year and a half for the development and testing of their catalytic converter system. As such, the car features many individual features, and I'm going to give you a little tour around the car just to show you those and explain why this is such a special car. The way in which the rear clamshell is completely different to any other car. When you look closely at the paintwork here, you can see how the F40 logo has actually been let into the carbon Kevlar, unlike any other F40. Internally, the rear clamshell is very different in the way it's made. These joints are different. The way in which the air cooling ducts are joined in are all very different. And then we look at the engine bay and we focus on that. This bar that covers the heightened wastegate, which is because this is a cat car, is actually made in a different style to that of a production car. There are also hints in the engine bay to its development car past. As we look at the bulkhead here, we've got the bung in place, which covers a hole where data cables would have been fed through into the cockpit during testing for people to take measurements and record data regarding engine behaviour, presumably whilst the cats were being developed. The most obvious external feature of this car that makes it different from a standard production car are the fog lights being in the rear grille as opposed to the rear lower valance. This is an absolute signature feature of a prototype. Under the front, again, we find a host of differences versus a standard production car. On the front clamshell, the way in which this air feed is manufactured is different, the black colouring. The shape of the brake cooling feeds has got a lip on it, which some of the early cars had, but only the very earliest cars. This front spare wheel well, two major differences here. The fact that it has this significant lip is very different to 99% of the production cars. And finally, this leather strap that you find here, which was originally installed to hold the spare wheel, but of course no production cars had a spare wheel. Finally, for the interior, this is where we find the most obvious differences, starting with these super lightweight doors with the perspex sliding windows, just like a racing car. These were obviously featured on quite a lot of the early cars, but the very earliest cars, most of them had this. Then we've got the Michelotto Lm Seats that were different to the standard production cars, a different style of headlining where the trim is directly onto the roof. The steering wheel in the car is a Momo variant with the logo shown on it. It's actually a slightly larger diameter. If you've driven a lot of F40s, as soon as you get in, you feel that your hands are slightly further apart. In the door hinge areas, there's a bracket here for what would have been a check strap, but they were never used on the final production cars. And then when we look at the carbon Kevlar weave here, it's very much like a prototype. It's not uniform and production car standard of quality. It feels really like a car that's been put together as a rolling prototype or a pre-series car, just like this one.